Puff Daddy, do you remember Miami? 2016. The bathtub girl? She still sees fire when she closes her eyes. But you called that a healing bath.
What did that ritual involve?
Oil. Candles. 2 other girls holding her down. She was shaking so bad, I thought her bones would break. But he said, she needs to be reborn. So I whispered the chant. I wiped the tears, and I told her, if you speak, the spirits will punish you.
So why didn't you stop?
Before we begin, please be advised, viewer discretion is recommended. The content presented here is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. It features the verbatim courtroom testimony from the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as documented by iMole Press. He said if I didn't help him silence her, he'd leak the tape. I was 17. That quote wasn't whispered in a tabloid. It came from open court. And it wasn't fiction. It was a woman breaking a decades-long spell of fear spun by one of the most powerful men in music, Sean Diddy Combs. So ask yourself, what kind of empire requires this much silence to survive? This isn't just about one predator. It's about the hidden machinery behind him. The lawyers, the labels, the influencers who looked the other way while the candles were lit, while the bodies were used, while the victims were forced to forget. And now, 3 women, once called witches, now understood as pawns, are testifying. Not to cast spells, but to break them. Diddy didn't just exploit bodies, he blackmailed minds, using sex tapes as insurance and spiritual manipulation as his weapon. The walls are finally cracking. The truth is louder than his chart toppers. And the real question isn't whether Diddy is guilty, it's how many helped him stay untouchable for this long. Because once you see the first testimony, you'll realize this wasn't music. It was a ritual of silence. And it begins with the day they finally spoke. Before you get entangled in this report, here's just a subtle reminder to please subscribe to support our research project and mission to hit 100K subscribers before the end of June. Thank you. Comment celebrities and people who are monsters like him and have stood with him in this evil. Let's use this opportunity to call them all out.
Miss Alara, do you remember the first time you were asked to perform a ritual?
Yes, I was 19. He said I had a gift. Told me I could help erase pain. I didn't know I'd be helping him erase evidence.
Can you tell the court what happened that night?
He brought a girl in. She was barely standing. Mascara down her face. No shoes. He said, clean her. I asked with what? He lit a candle. Told me with your words.
And what did he make you say?
I had to hold her face and whisper. This never happened. You are clean. You were chosen.
Did she respond?
She cried. She kept asking, where are my clothes? He played music to drown her out. His own track. Loud. Smiling. Like it was some sick music video.
Why didn't you walk away?
Because I saw my own video the week before. He recorded me. Said if I ever told anyone, my parents would see it. The internet would see it. So I stayed. I became his spell.
How many girls, Alara?
Too many. Some were silent. Some screamed. One bit her tongue so hard she bled on the pillow. He told me that was purging the darkness.
And you? When did you realize you weren't a healer? You were hostage.
The day he told me, your voice is my property. That's when I knew. I was never chosen. I was chained. He called us witches, but we weren't casting spells. We were burying girls, alive. Ritual, chant and a lie, whispered into their ears while they trembled in his bed.
The courtroom was cold. Not just from the air conditioning, but from the weight of what was about to happen. 3 women walked in, not dressed for drama, but for war. No makeup, no glamour, no PR rep whispering in their ears. Just trembling hands, tired eyes, and the kind of silence that says they're about to tell you something you've never heard before. And then the first one opened her mouth. He told me to light the candles, play the music, and tell her she'd forget it all by morning. Or my tape goes online. Gasp. One juror covered their mouth. A cameraman blinked like he didn't know if he should be filming. Diddy didn't flinch. Just sat there, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Like a man watching his whole empire start to smoke. This wasn't rumor anymore. This wasn't blogs and blind items. This was real, and raw, and absolutely disgusting. They called them witches. That was the industry's little joke. Not because these women wore black or cast spells in the woods, but because they were forced to perform cleansing rituals for the girls Diddy allegedly abused. No police, no therapy, just sage, candles, and a sick lie that what happened to them never did. They were the cleanup crew for his crimes. And now, they were the ones dragging it all into the light. The courtroom smelled like sweat, fear, and stale coffee. Reporters fumbled to keep up with the quotes. The second woman spoke. Soft, but sharp. We didn't want to help him, but we were scared. I knew what he did to the others. I saw it. I watched her cry and bleed and beg. I didn't say a word. Her voice cracked. Not from weakness, but from holding in guilt for too long. Let's be clear. These weren't spellcasters. They were kids when he found them. Young. Confused. Looking for purpose in an industry that promised stars and gave them shackles. Diddy offered protection, then filmed them naked. Called it art. Then used those tapes as a leash. One false move and it's all online. Imagine that. Your worst moment turned into a weapon. That's not power. That's psychological torture. And the audience in the courtroom? Dead quiet. Not even the usual shuffling. It was like the walls were listening, too. Like the room itself was stunned by the scale of rot being exposed. The third woman took the stand. Her hands shook so bad she had to hold the mic like a baby bird. But her words? Like knives. He made me stand there and chant. I didn't know what it meant. I just wanted to go home. But he said if I left, he'd send it to my mom. Let that sink in. This wasn't some edgy music video fantasy. This was fear, manufactured and bottled. Sold behind velvet ropes and whispered through contracts. And those girls, those so-called witches, were just the latest in a long line of tools used to keep victims quiet. They weren't evil. They were evidence. You could feel the room crack. Like something sacred had been broken. The mask was off. The empire wasn't made of beats and bling. It was built on silence. And shame. And secrets kept behind studio walls. There was a moment when one of the women looked directly at Diddy. No tears. No yelling. Just one sentence that made the back of everyone's neck stiffen. You thought we'd never talk. He looked away. Because here's the part they didn't plan for. Trauma doesn't stay quiet forever. It festers. It boils. And then one day it screams. The prosecutors sat like stone. The defense tried to object. Said the stories were irrelevant. Old news. Just bitterness. But the jury heard it. We all did. And it didn't sound like bitterness. It sounded like truth. This story isn't about weird rituals. It's about what happens when someone gets so powerful, they think laws don't apply. They think they can buy silence. Erase memories. Rebrand abuse as mysticism. And the people around them, they either helped, or they shut up. So here we are. Finally hearing the voices that were never supposed to speak. And if you're still wondering if this really happened, ask yourself this. Why would someone lie about this? Why would 3 women walk into a room full of cameras, tell the most humiliating stories of their lives, and risk everything? Unless it was real. Because the spell is broken now. The glamour is gone. And what's left behind? That's what we'll look at next. The spell itself. What it was. Who helped craft it. And how it fooled an entire industry.
Miss Naya, what was your role in Sean Combs' inner circle?
They called me the closer. When a girl broke down, I was the one who made sure she didn't remember why.
How exactly did you do that?
Smudging. Chance. Microdoses of shrooms mixed in tea. He called it spiritual recalibration. It was just sedation with a mask.
And who prepared the tea?
I did. Every time.
Did you know what you were doing?
First no. Then yes. And by then I was in too deep. He had a tape of me. 2 actually. He told me 1 click and my life was over. So I became quiet, obedient, and cold. I became what he needed. Not a person, a function.
Did any girl ever resist the ritual?
Yes. One tried to run. He locked her in a closet for 6 hours. When she came out, she couldn't speak. He said, now she's ready for healing.
What did you feel in that moment?
Nothing. That was the scariest part.
Did you ever try to stop it?
Yes. Once. I told him the girl needed a hospital. He said, the only thing she needs is forgetting. Then he smiled and handed me a robe. Told me to go fix the energy. I did what I was told because I thought survival meant silence. But I was wrong. Silence wasn't survival. It was collateral damage. He gave this to me after every ritual. Said it was for protection. But all it ever did was remind me I was property.
So why are you here now?
'Cause I need you to understand. I wasn't casting spells. I was burying evidence. And now I want it to be dug up, every last piece of it.
You want to know how he got away with it? It wasn't just the lawyers, or the payoffs. or the security teams trained to erase a problem before it leaked. No, Diddy had something darker, something colder, something built on fear and smoke and shame. He had a spell, not the fairy tale kind, not wands and wizard hats. This was a real-world curse. Shut up or be destroyed. And he made sure that spell worked every single time. The women from the courtroom called it cleansing. But what they were really doing was cleaning up evidence. The rituals weren't spiritual. They were psychological. Candles, incense, mirrors turned to the wall. Victims were told to release the memory and breathe it out. Sometimes they were given pills. Sometimes they were filmed during the ritual. We made her repeat, "It never happened. I am clean." And she cried the whole time. That's what one of the witches said in court. The prosecutor froze. So did we. You could smell lavender and sweat. Victims sat cross-legged on satin floors. Lights dimmed. Music playing softly. One of Diddy's own tracks, of course. Like a sick lullaby. His voice echoing while the victims broke down. Right on cue. This wasn't healing. It was rewiring. The spell wasn't made of magic. It was gaslighting turned into performance art. You're not allowed to remember. You're not allowed to speak. If you do, look what I have on you. Because here's the twist. These rituals were almost always recorded. Cameras hidden in smoke detectors. Tripods with red lights tucked in the corner. One woman testified she found footage of herself online, years later, used in a password-protected forum. She'd been crying, half-naked, chanting, and she had no memory of it being filmed. He didn't just silence them. He kept receipts. They called it insurance. He called it protection. But really, it was leverage. One wrong move, and your trauma becomes a porn category. And the worst part? Nobody inside the machine blinked. Assistants set up the rooms. Stylists brought the robes. DJs cued the playlist. Everyone had a job. Everyone saw enough to know, and still did nothing. Because in that world, silence is currency. And Diddy was the king of counterfeit peace. The ones who tried to leave were the ones he hit hardest. One woman testified. He'd show us the tapes. Not just ours, other girls too. He'd say, "This is what happens when you run your mouth." Imagine hearing that at 19. Your whole life, hanging on the edge of a man's hard drive. This wasn't just manipulation. It was psychological slavery. He didn't chain bodies. He chained memories. He taught them how to forget, and when forgetting failed, he made them too ashamed to speak. That's the real spell, not making someone disappear, but making them wish they had. And where were the watchdogs? The labels? The execs? The industry mentors who post about healing in safe spaces? Please. They were too busy counting the streams. Too busy cashing the checks. Too busy saying, "That's just Diddy being Diddy." Like abuse is a brand now. He was too rich to be real. Too famous to be questioned. Too connected to be touched. But the spell didn't just work on victims. It worked on us. The fans. The public. The ones who danced while the blood dried off the studio floor. Because we didn't want to believe someone so iconic could be this evil. But evil doesn't need horns. Sometimes it wears sunglasses indoors and calls itself a mogul. One of the women looked straight into the camera when she said it. He told us if we obeyed, he'd protect us. But the only thing he ever protected was himself. Her voice didn't crack. She didn't blink. And in that moment, the spell didn't just break, it shattered. So where does that leave us? We've seen the rituals, heard the lies, smelled the fear. We know now this wasn't just about power. It was about controlling memory itself. Turning truth into fog, victims into liars, evidence into leverage. The spell of silence worked. 4 years. But now the recordings are out. The stories are told. The silence is screaming. And what comes next? We'll go to the ones who made the illusion possible. The enablers. The yes men. The industry hands that helped Diddy light the candles and close the door. Because no monster thrives without a stage crew. And it's time we call them out.
State your name for the record, please.
Zaria Monet Bellamy. Also known as Witch Number 3. But I prefer Truth Teller now.
You were involved in several of the alleged silencing rituals?
Involved. I led some. Not because I wanted to, because I was ordered to. By him. Your client. The man in the $10,000 suit who called me a queen by day, and his safety net by night. Puff Daddy. Do you remember Miami? 2016. The bathtub girl? She still sees fire when she closes her eyes. But you called that a healing bath.
What did that ritual involve?
Oil. Candles. 2 other girls holding her down. She was shaking so bad, I thought her bones would break. But he said, she needs to be reborn. So I whispered the chant. I wiped the tears, and I told her, if you speak, the spirits will punish you.
So why didn't you stop?
Because I was a prisoner too. You think I wanted to wear beads and lie for a devil in Dior? He filmed me in 2015. I thought it was sex. He called it insurance. Said if I ever opened my mouth, he'd upload it during Sunday service. Said he'd make my mama watch it. So I learned the scripts, smiled at the parties, became the spiritual queen they all loved to post. But inside, I was rotting.
Can you describe your last ritual?
It was a girl no older than 18. She said, please don't touch me. He told me to clear her mind. I looked her in the eyes, and I lied. This is love, I told her. This is cleansing. But the only thing being cleansed was his conscience.
Why testify now?
Because I refuse to be part of his spell anymore. Because I still see her face in my sleep. Because I want every girl watching this to know. He made us witches, but we were girls first. And no girl should be told that abuse is divine.
They called him a king, a mogul, the man who turned bad boy into big business. Sean Diddy Combs strutted across red carpets like he owned the air. Grammy stages, fashion shows, charity galas, private jets, a cologne line, a vodka empire, a legacy dripping in diamonds and filtered through gold-tinted lenses. But here's the thing about illusions. They only work if nobody looks too close. And no one wanted to look. When Diddy walked into a room, people stood up. Not out of respect, but fear. You could feel it. Like the air itself got heavy. Like your voice shrank 2 sizes just by being near him. Laughter got fake. Smiles turned stiff. And every phone in the room got turned off unless he gave the nod. He didn't need to say much. His power wasn't loud. It was implied. Like a gun sitting quietly on the table while everyone pretended it wasn't there. He didn't demand loyalty. He bought it. With cars, contracts, promises, vacations, bags of cash handed off in recording studios. And the price? Your silence, your soul, sometimes your body. That's how you stay on top for decades without anyone officially asking questions. Not because you're innocent, but because the illusion is too expensive to break. People said things like, he's just intense. Or, that's the industry. You gotta be cutthroat. Cutthroat? No. What he did wasn't business. It was predatory theater. He wasn't protecting a legacy. He was guarding a dungeon. Let's talk about the assistants who knew everything. The drivers who waited outside the hotel for hours while girls went in and didn't come out the same. The lawyers who drafted NDA after NDA like it was office paperwork. The bodyguards who stood by the door, not to stop danger from coming in, but to keep truth from getting out. They all played a part. They all saw something. And they stayed quiet. You want to know what betrayal smells like? It smells like designer cologne, sweat, and fear. The kind of fear that sticks to your clothes. That turns your stomach sour even when you're drinking $1,000 champagne. That's what some of Diddy's former staff admitted in sealed testimony. He didn't need to scream to scare you. He'd just walk up behind you and whisper, "You know what happens if this gets out." And smile. Imagine getting paid 6 figures to feel like you're one mistake away from being erased. Because power in Diddy's world wasn't just about money or fame. It was about control. He didn't want to be loved. He wanted to be untouchable. He built a brand that looked like success but ran on silence. People weren't clapping for the man. They were clapping for the myth. The empire. The curated lifestyle. The viral moments. The parties with A-listers and billionaires and kids half his age who thought they'd made it just by being near him. And the media ate it up. Every beat drop. Every club opening. Every fake romance and red carpet grin. Nobody questioned why women around him looked like they were acting in slow motion. Or why some of them disappeared overnight. We celebrated him. Let's not lie. He sold us a fantasy, and we bought it like it was on sale. But inside the fantasy was a prison. And the walls weren't made of steel. They were made of fear and favors. And shame. One former producer said it best. You didn't say no to Diddy. You didn't ask questions. You just thanked him for the opportunity and hoped you didn't see something you couldn't forget. That's the cost of being in the room. That's how illusions work. Smoke, lights, and a silent agreement that no one pulls back the curtain. But now, the curtain's shredded. People are talking. Victims are speaking. Former staffers are flipping. Courtroom doors are swinging open. NDAs are cracking under pressure. And the illusion, it's bleeding. Diddy wanted the world to believe he was a self-made god. A visionary. A cultural icon. But power built on silence isn't power. It's a scam. And scams always collapse. Eventually. So if you're still wondering why no one said anything for so long, Maybe the better question is, who made sure they didn't? Because next, we're going to look at them. The enablers. The industry fixers. The ones who didn't just protect the illusion, they profited from it. Let's stop pretending Diddy did this alone. Monsters don't get this powerful without help. They don't hide this long without shields. And they sure as hell don't keep victims quiet for decades without a system that likes it that way. So let's talk about the real beast, the industry that watched him do it and passed him another drink. This isn't just about one man. It's about the machine behind him. A sick machine that polishes predators, hides bruises behind contracts, and calls abuse branding. The entertainment industry doesn't punish the powerful. It protects them. You've seen it before. We all have. The same fake apologies. The same headlines. Allegations surface. Star responds. Damage control in motion. Then, silence. Always silence. And while the headlines fade, the victims stay broken. Let me show you how it really works. Behind every mogul like Diddy, there's a fixer. Someone who takes care of problems. Someone who calls the hotel, flies in the lawyer, pressures the witness, and files the paperwork. Fast, quiet, clean. There's a PR team that spins every accusation into a misunderstanding. A stylist who wipes tears off a girl's face before the cameras roll. A driver who knows which hospitals don't ask questions. And a record label that runs background checks, not on the star, but on the victim. If she has debt, great. If she ever did drugs, perfect. That's how they win. They don't protect the truth. They buy silence and destroy credibility. It's not an accident. It's a blueprint. One assistant said the quiet part out loud in a leaked deposition. We were told not to intervene, just to keep them separated until she calmed down. Think about that. A woman walks out of a hotel room crying, shaking, barely able to stand, and the response is to keep them separated. Like dogs after a fight. And what about the big names? The ones we still stream? The ones who showed up at his parties, laughed at his jokes, toasted champagne in clubs while he leaned into young girls' ears? They saw things, heard things, maybe not the worst of it, but enough. And they still smiled for the camera. Because in this industry, loyalty isn't about doing what's right. It's about staying close to the power source. And when that power turns dark, you don't walk away. You close your eyes, you hold your breath, and you hope no one asks you what you knew. Let's be real. If a barista heard what these Grammy winners heard, they'd call the police. If a school teacher saw what these execs saw, they'd call child services. But in Hollywood, you call the publicist. It's not just silence, it's complicity. There are people who helped hide Diddy's messes, erase his tracks, bribe his accusers, and clean his image. Not for justice, for profit. Because the music made money. The scandal did too. They made documentaries about his rise. They gave him TV deals, fashion deals, liquor deals, all while whispers of abuse piled up like unpaid bills. And when the lawsuits came, when the tape started to leak, when the witches finally spoke, they acted shocked. But they weren't. They just hoped the fire wouldn't reach them. The truth. The entertainment industry doesn't need good people. It needs useful people. If you're quiet, compliant, beautiful, and broken, perfect. If you speak up, you get buried. Just ask the background singers, the dancers, the interns, the assistants, the ones who left the business not because they couldn't make it, but because they barely survived it. Hollywood doesn't eat its young. It drains them dry, throws away the bones, then blames them for bleeding. One former choreographer said, he treated girls like set pieces. You bring them in, dress them up, shut them down. If they cried, someone would come in with makeup. Set pieces. That's the mirror. The one nobody wants to look into. The one that shows this whole industry, this shiny, fake, filtered world, for what it really is. A stage full of ghosts and a spotlight too dirty to see through. And now, with courtrooms heating up and headlines finally refusing to be buried, the industry is pretending to care. Posting black squares. Releasing statements. Standing with survivors. But where were they when the cameras weren't rolling? Where were they when the cleansing rituals were happening in soundproof rooms? Where were they when the tapes were being made? Because here's the bitter truth. The industry didn't fail the victims. It used them. And if we keep letting them hide behind hashtags and PR statements, they'll do it again. But next, we turn to those who truly knew better. The celebrities. The collaborators. The brothers who shook his hand while pretending they didn't see the blood on it. Because silence might be power, but proximity is guilt. They called them witches, liars, fakes, tools of the devil. But when you hear what they went through, what they were forced to do, you don't see witches. You see survivors wearing the wrong costumes. Let's rewind. These weren't born manipulators. They weren't predators hunting victims. They were girls. Some just out of high school. Some just trying to make it in an industry that only knows how to chew and spit. They weren't casting spells. They were trapped in one. One of them said she was found at an open mic. Diddy took an interest, said she had good energy, promised to teach her the real work. She thought she'd made it. What she made it into was a gilded cage with velvet ropes and spiritual blackmail. She didn't read ancient books or chant over bubbling cauldrons. She lit sage, like she was told. She poured water in a bowl, like she was told. She sat next to crying girls, whispered scripted lines, and helped erase memories, like she was told. Because the cameras were rolling, and her own tape was already recorded. She had no way out. You could almost smell the fear in her voice when she testified. He told me if I ever refused to do a ritual, he'd leak the footage of me with him. I didn't even know he was filming. Let that sink in. Imagine being 19, broke, scared, desperate, and being told your only way to stay safe is to help someone else forget what he just did to them. And if you don't, you're next. They were labeled enablers. But what they really were hostages. Not in chains, but in contracts. Not in basements, but in penthouses with locked drawers full of dirty secrets. They weren't proud of what they did. They weren't heartless. They cried after the rituals. They vomited backstage. One girl said she stopped eating because she thought her body was haunted by the energy they were forced to carry. You could hear it in her voice. Shame sitting in every syllable. I helped him because I thought I had no other choice. I thought if I kept quiet, if I did my part, maybe he'd let me go one day. He never did. Instead, he made them part of the show. Spiritual props. Exotic accessories at VIP parties. People asked questions, sure. But no one wanted the real answers. Is she really a witch? Do they do rituals in the studio? It was all part of the image. Meanwhile, these girls were falling apart inside. Sleeping with the lights on, checking under their beds for cameras, spiraling into panic attacks every time Diddy texted, "I need you." They didn't silence victims because they were evil. They did it because they were victims too. Just a few steps further up the chain. They were used like mouthpieces. Told to call rape healing. Told to call fear cleansing. Told to stare someone in the eyes and say, "It never happened. You're safe now." While knowing damn well it did. Imagine the mental gymnastics. Imagine the guilt. They weren't witches. They were mirrors, cracked and forced to reflect whatever Diddy wanted. So yes, they helped him. Yes, they played a part in covering the blood with flowers. But don't mistake survival for consent. They didn't want this. They begged him to stop. And when they finally tried to leave, he used their own recorded rituals as blackmail. That's not partnership. That's psychological hostage-taking. So if you're angry, and you should be, aim it where it belongs. Not at the girls who were stuck in a nightmare. Aim it at the man who wrote the script. Aim it at the system that gave him the camera, the platform, and the silence. Because when the witches finally broke the spell, when they stood up and told the world what really happened, they didn't sound like villains. They sounded like soldiers coming home from a war nobody believed they were in. And now, we're left with one question. If he could use them, the ones closest to him, as pawns in his ritual of silence, who else did he use? The next section looks at the collaborators. The men in suits. The superstars in photos. The people who weren't scared, but still said nothing. The courtroom smelled like sweat and stale coffee. Cameras clicked. Reporters held their breath. And Diddy? He sat frozen. Not the untouchable mogul anymore. Just a man backed into a corner, watching the walls finally cave in. Because this time, the truth didn't go away. No NDA. No private jet. No spiritual advisor could stop what happened that morning. 3 women walked in, and the illusion walked out. One by one, they testified. And this time, nobody blinked it away. The judge listened. The jury stared. The press stopped whispering and started writing. Even the industry, yes, the same one that made him a god, started acting like maybe, just maybe, it was time to pick a side. The spell is broken. The tapes are leaking. The names are stacking up. And make no mistake, Diddy's not the only one shaking. Because predators don't operate alone. They breed in packs. Now people are flipping. Former staff, bodyguards, chauffeurs, stylists, people who once said, "I didn't see anything," are suddenly remembering a lot. Why? Because when one domino falls, the rest get nervous. And guess what? That long list of collaborators, those brothers who stood behind him, toasted him, partied with him, they're next. If you stood by a monster and said nothing, don't act shocked when the monster drags you down too. Now, prosecutors are moving faster. Feds are knocking on doors. Evidence is piling up. Security footage that didn't exist, text messages that were deleted, bank records that never should have been touched. The silence that once protected him? It's gone. Now people are talking, not because they want to, but because they don't want to go down with him. You can smell the fear in the suits now. Their perfume doesn't cover the panic. Their smiles don't hide the sweat. People who once bragged about being in the room with Diddy are suddenly saying, "I barely knew him." Funny how loyalty dies when the subpoenas show up. This isn't just a trial. This is a reckoning. One of the victims said it best. He built an empire out of our silence. Now we're going to bury it with our voices. And that's exactly what's happening. Survivors are connecting. Lawsuits are multiplying. More ritual girls are coming forward. More handlers are naming names. And every name brings us closer to understanding how big this really is. This was never just one man abusing power. This was an entire system designed to help him do it, and punish anyone who tried to stop it. You can feel the panic ripple through Hollywood now. One producer gets cold feet. One brand pauses a sponsorship. One major label goes into full lockdown, scrubbing old contracts and legal files. It's like watching roaches scatter when the lights come on. But here's the part they didn't plan for. This time, the light's not turning off. Victims are tired of hiding. The world is tired of pretending. And the audience, the same one that once screamed for his hits, is screaming for justice now. People are asking real questions. Why did it take this long? Who helped him? Who's still helping? The reckoning is real. And it's just getting started. Diddy wanted to go down in history as a king. He might still make history, but not the way he planned. Because when the truth finally kicks in the door, it doesn't knock. It doesn't ask for permission. It brings everything with it. Now ask yourself this. If this is what one trial reveals, what's still hiding behind closed studio doors? Next, we turn to the ones still silent. The ones whose faces you know. The artists. The collaborators. The ones who smiled beside him. And now pretend they didn't see a thing. Because silence wasn't just a cover-up. It was a business strategy. So here we are, past the headlines, beyond the red carpets. What's left isn't just a shattered image of Diddy, but a mirror held up to an industry that knew and looked away. We've heard the women he used, the silence he bought, the rituals he twisted into tools of control. But if this story made your skin crawl, good. It should. Because this wasn't fame gone too far. It was a system functioning exactly as designed. Protecting the powerful, silencing the broken, and cashing in on trauma dressed as entertainment. Diddy didn't create this sickness. He just wore it better than most. The problem isn't just him. It's the network of handlers, collaborators, executives, and friends who kept the music playing while lives were being torn apart backstage. This isn't gossip. This is justice knocking on the wrong doors. Finally, comment below if you think it's time we stop letting power erase pain. Share this if you believe silence is complicity. Subscribe. We're not done. There's more truth to expose. Because if one man can hide this much horror, how many more are still hiding in plain sight?